Welcome to Unschool, where we undoctrinate you from public school nonsense. Today we're discussing DEI as a mental illness. Who was discussing that on X in the last few days? Mostly James Lindsay, author of such books as Race Marxism, which is the proper definition of critical race theory. Race Marxism. I recommend looking that book up if you haven't read it already. He has a number of other books that are out that are quite good. Just came out with a new one as well, and he defines DEI as a mental illness. And then we have Christopher Rufo, who I also like quite a bit. He's conservative, and he argues that there is a movement in conservatism to get rid of nonsense like CRT and the progressivism that has taken over the education system and quite a lot of institutions. So I wrote this little quote here that says, well, it's a quote of myself, I suppose, but other people are saying similar things these days. It says, conservatism is the new counterculture. I think there's some truth to that. Lindsay, in one of his tweets, says that mental illness is a conglomeration of cluster B personality disorders, which I also reference in this article here. And those personality disorders include borderline, histrionic, antisocial, and narcissistic disorders. And I do feel sorry for anyone that is suffering from that. It is probably quite difficult. But I do say here, at least pertaining to the CRT cult, we could define these personality disorders as being attention seeking, self centered rage enthusiasts, right? That's the truth. We can definitely see that on college campuses. We can definitely see that amongst the anti-Israel protests happening across Ivy League schools, right? That's not okay. Moving on. Oh, we have this. This is the paid subscriber version, so you'll have to pay to read the rest. But we'll keep talking here about this particular problem. So for those who deny the idea that DEI is associated with mental illness, I would point them to Google, which talks about it in a positive way, like it's a good thing that DEI is associated with mental illness. In fact, the intersectionalists sit here and claim that they are a match made in heaven, that there's a cause and effect relationship. DEI is the solution to mental illness in their mind. I don't think it is. I don't think DEI is going to usher in any sort of woke utopia. They don't stand a chance. But it says here, this is not just a correlation between DEI and mental health, but the two have a cause effect relationship. If someone's race, identity, and sense of who they are questioned and are used against them, it will negatively impact their mental health in a significant way. So it says up here, to be true advocates for equity, we must continuously develop and present new ways of elevating and building alliances with underrepresented groups. Right, but that's their mantra, but it's not the truth. They only see underrepresented groups as tools for them to gain power. The true struggle, as it says here, is a Marxist or communist struggle, and we all know how that ends up. It's not good. They don't care about mental wellness, but they constantly talk about consciousness. The Marxists in the Maoist revolution always talked about consciousness and mental wellness. They thought you needed to achieve your class consciousness in order to enter the new utopia, which is ridiculous. But the intellectuals, the pseudo intellectuals, are bringing back this nonsense once again. Here's another article: mental health as a key focus in DEI initiatives. Unfortunately, though, they paint this picture that everything outside besides them are causing some sort of mental illness. They blame it on white people. They blame it on supposedly racist institutions, when in fact they control a lot of these institutions. The DEI folks do, right? They run the education system, except in Florida. In Florida, we're getting rid of DEI, and that I think is quite fantastic. They're firing people left and right. They just fired everyone at the University of Florida, as this article says. Diversity, equity, and inclusion employees will no longer have a job at UF. So sad. Oh wait, no, it's not sad at all. I'm glad. And this phrase here, we that was not true. They just made a law about not talking about sexual topics with kids third grade and below. I think that's fine. Um, so the University of Florida announced Friday that it is eliminating all diversity, equity, and inclusion employee positions. Woohoo! That's fantastic. This change, announced through an email administrative memo, comes after the Florida Board of Governors labeled expenditures related to DEI programs as prohibited. The memo explains that to comply with the Florida Board of Governors Regulation 9.016 on prohibited expenditures, the University of Florida has closed the office of Chief Diversity Officer. That should we say Chief Marxist Officer, eliminated DEI positions and administrative appointments, and halted DEI focused contracts with outside vendors. What is an outside vendor in this case? This is the class conscious individuals, the racial or sexually conscious individuals that come in and preach narratives about racial oppression and advocate for critical race theory coupled with affirmative action and the idea that there's always someone they think there's always someone out to get them, and it's just ridiculous. But anyways, Board of Governors defines DEI as any program, campus activity, or policy that classifies individuals on the basis of color, race, sex, national origin, gender identity, or sexual orientation, and promotes differential or preferential treatment, right? Because DEI is a complete counter to Martin Luther King. On this channel, we support Martin Luther King Jr. and his idea that we should evaluate people by the content of their character. Well, the woke DEI cultists don't support MLK. They support W.E.B. Du Bois and his weird concepts of double consciousness. But anyways, moving on. It says here, did you know that 90% of companies say they focus on diversity, equity, inclusion? Well, not anymore. That's definitely on the decline. Did you know that 90%, only 4% of them say they focus on disabilities as part of DEI standards? Well, why would you, that's not what it's not helpful to people with disabilities for the DEI people to come for them, because again, they think that that your disability is superseding your who you are as a person. Like the content of your character is more important than these external features. So, but these articles, this is common on LinkedIn. That's why I don't use LinkedIn anymore. They're just constantly advocating for ridiculous far leftist woke initiatives, and now you have to put your pronouns in your personality in your profile on LinkedIn, which I find to be a little ridiculous. Okay, here's another article on the University of Florida firing DEI officials. And as I wrote in my article in Unschool, I think that this will become a trend, at least in red states. They're going to start banning it more and more. But then what will happen is the DEI supporters will just start rebranding it, right? DEI is already a rebranding of Marxist ideology, right? It's a new denomination of the same religion that focuses on racial and sexual consciousness more so than class consciousness. So, but they're getting rid of a lot of this stuff, which is a good thing. Here are some of the tweets, or some whatever we're calling them now, the X's, which sounds ridiculous. But just so we're clear, I do like these three guys, and they're having a lighthearted debate here. They're not trying to cancel each other. But Christopher Rufo is a conservative who has done a great job countering DEI. He doesn't agree with the notion that DEI is a mental illness. It may not be a mental illness directly, but they certainly use people who are mentally ill as tools in their woke revolution, because they know that they are people that they can take advantage of, because they'll talk about empathy and fairness till they're blue in the face, but that's not what they really are aiming for, and that's unfortunate. So, they were unhappy that Rufo called it a conservative counterculture revolution. But I think he points out accurately that the right wing is fighting a little bit more against DEI initiatives, and the far left is pushing for them, and liberals are just kind of going along with it and not really countering it. But progressives and socialists are definitely all about DEI, and unfortunately, they've gotten too much influence in the education system. So this is a little bit of the article there talking about the same stuff we read earlier. And then he says, and then Eric Weinstein, who I don't know if he still considers himself a progressive. I don't think so. His brother Brett gave up on progressivism after he got kicked out of Evergreen University in, I believe it was 2017, for not going along with segregation. Right? Evergreen is pro segregation. They want to separate people by race, and they actually had days at Evergreen where white people weren't allowed to go. It's ridiculous. But he says, only it's not conservative. It's great news, right? We're all in agreement that this is fantastic news to get rid of DEI, but it's not conservative. He says, as I said repeatedly, DEI is effectively a mental illness. So this is actually the worldview that the left is pushing for a little bit more. Like Lindsay and Weinstein have decided that it's mental illness and a promotion of mental illness that's infected, or as the great Gad Saad would say, parasitized the university system. Really recommend his book as well. It's not liberal progressive, it's just evil. Ain't that the truth? It is evil. DEI is evil. Evaluating people just by external factors, that's in total opposition to the Christian or Jewish worldview that we should evaluate people by who they are internally. There are other mental illnesses inside the Republican Party that are fought by decent Republicans. I very much admire. Those mental illnesses aren't somehow conservative. He doesn't really give any examples, though. Many of us on the front lines of fighting this thing coming for our country are not conservatives. I'm sure you're, obviously we're all anti-Nazi and anti-white supremacists, but I wouldn't call those positions progressive. I point out in my Unschool article, though, that progressives were very pro-eugenics. They're far from Nazis, but they were very pro-eugenics in the first half of the 20th century. So common sense and decency, yeah, I think those things are, those could atone, definitely relate to conservatives, but they can relate to liberals from time to time as well. But the liberal moniker has been taken over, I think, by progressives and socialists. Liberalism is hardly classically liberal anymore. So he says, I join you in celebrating the necessary death of DEI, right? That is quite important. So, and, right, this person says it's a victory, but we haven't won the war yet. We must stay diligent, or maybe vigilant, or not vigilant, vigilant is what they mean. Moving on, James Lindsay says DEI is based on critical theory, which is at least a cult belief system that's extensively comorbid with both essential and functional mental illnesses, particularly cluster B and paranoid personality disorders. As I also talk a little bit about in my article on my Substack. Classical and traditional liberals oppose it. I certainly hope that's true. It just seems like so many are fooled by them using that Mott and Bailey fallacy concerning empathy and fairness, right? DEI has nothing to do with empathy and fairness. And then I like this point here where he says, all Marxism is cult religious. It begins by believing it uniquely knows what human beings really are, socio-spiritual beings, into what they have been thrown, a mundane world of property ownership and suffering through scarcity. Because again, the Marxist and all its derivative denominations believe that capitalism is civilization and civilization is oppressive, and they have to get rid of that so that we can somehow get past scarcity, right? But scarcity exists in the real world. Scarcity economics is essentially the study of scarcity, right? Because we live in a world with scarce resources, and we live in a world that's spontaneous, and we go out in the world and human beings do try to bring a bit of order to it. Okay. Well, we must return social society. That's really the utopian nonsense as exemplified from everything from Karl Marx's Das Kapital to Howard Zinn's People's History, and it's all pretty ridiculous. Okay, so we don't want to support any of that nonsense. And then I think Elon Musk's cartoon. I've never been left wing, but he kind of expresses the worldview that the left keeps moving further to the left over the past decade. A lot of that has to do with Barack Obama just making everything about race, as well as BLM making everything about race starting in around 2012, I suppose. They really started encouraging that, and it just accelerated and got worse and worse. And now some moderate left wingers are considered right wing, especially by the mainstream media. They improperly label mildly left wing people as alt right. Right, Tim Pool, who's left wing, they call him alt right because he's against what's happening in the education system and our institutions. But I'm going to end it there for today because this video is already getting kind of long. Please like and subscribe. Please follow my Substack. Thank you.